Hey there. Welcome to the House Music Connection podcast. I'm your host, Tony Fuel. And each week on this podcast, we talk with different artists to discuss their stories, some of their challenges and successes, so that ultimately we can all feel more connected as a house music community and learn from one another. So my guest for today is Jesse Walker, based in Salt Lake City. For the last couple decades and then some, Jesse's been a consistent force in curating house music parties and house music events and making sure that house music has a place in Salt Lake City, despite some of the weird laws that are kind of prohibitive to dancing and dance music culture. We also discuss a recent project that Jesse has been a part of where he mentors some students from the University of Utah, and they ultimately end up hosting an event and an art installation and raise money for the Frankie Knuckles Foundation. With that, let's just get into the conversation. Hey, Jesse, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm really excited to have you on, and I think our listeners will get a lot out of this. And, like I said, the whole goal is for the house music community to feel more connected with each other. So I'm grateful that you're adding to this conversation. So before we really get into, as we begin or kick things off, how would you describe yourself for those who may not be familiar with you? What you do, who you are, in 60 seconds.
Well, thanks for having me, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here. Let's see. Wow. I guess how I've described myself to a lot of people is a designer and DJ, because I've been doing both of those things like as long as I can remember. So, like many, mid-sized city DJs have been struggling out there, since the beginning of dance music in the U.S. I came from Idaho, and I ended up making my way to Salt Lake City, where I've just kind of been one of the house guys with various entities and friends and collaborators working on all kinds of projects, but mostly promoting, house music and parties and bringing DJs through and being, one of the stops for that kind of thing. But I've also dabbled in art collaborations and music supervision and festivals and you name it. I've probably done it. Wedding DJ, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But house music has always been my passion, and I've been lucky enough to, through doing that just over the course of many, many years, had the opportunity to meet lots of cool people and, hear lots of great music. So just trying to spread the love.
Awesome. Very cool. So you mentioned Salt Lake City. And let's see, what is the Salt Lake City scene like?
Surprisingly vibrant, I think. Even going back to the 80s, I think, bands that would come through Salt Lake, synth bands in particular, like, Depeche Mode and Erasure would get some of the biggest audiences in the country and would consistently come back just, and remember that Salt Lake had a hunger for music and a message that was, coming, from artists that, kind of signaled a lot of the repression and angst that is, in a lot of suburban, white, predominantly, places in America. But it has changed and evolved over the years, and there was a lot of punk, and because of the Mormon Church, there's like a very vibrant counterculture. So I always tell people that it's kind of fascinating that a lot of the subcultures in the city kind of band together because we have a common sort of I don't want to say enemy, but like,
Mm-hmm.
the Mormon Church is a very heavy hand in the legislature and the laws and liquor laws, and kind of, there was a bit of a no fun aspect to the, after parties and the, just clubbing in general, throughout the years. So, you find a lot of these communities holding hands, and, there's a lot of, working together in a weird way. Like you will see the same person at a punk show, at a rave the next night, and, or at a goth club or whatever, like back in the day. So I
Cool.
love that it's small enough to have that crossover. And, but yeah, the community is always vibrant. And, today we have much more multicultural, across the spectrum, people coming up doing really cool shit. And, people doing hi-fi sound system after hours, bringing, Michael Serafini through to do
Mm.
disco after hours, and Horse Meat Disco. I played with 3 times, there. So it's
Nice.
like, or twice, sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's surprising. So,
Yeah. So, you mentioned the challenges of like the liquor laws and whatnot. I spent a little bit of time in Salt Lake City, and I remember at one time you had to have like a membership, like to be able to like have a nightclub or like a bar, or like to be able to serve liquor. Is that still the case?
think of it as like voter suppression.
Mm,
Like, imagine going to vote and they ask you for 10 forms of ID until you just
mm,
give up. So there was just, there was an extra rule in place that you had to have either buy a membership, it was a private club license,
mm,
or then they started doing a thing where the door guy could actually represent somebody that had a membership and sponsor you.
mm,
And then you had to like write down your name and phone number, and like, it was just silliness.
mm,
And we've had a myriad of very obtuse laws come into place. One was called the Zion Curtain, where like in a restaurant you couldn't, see somebody mixing a cocktail. So you
mm,
had to build this like artificial wall around the bartenders section where, heaven forbid a child see somebody like, doing the, you
mm.
know, cocktail thing, like the shaking something, they'll instantly want to drink, Um, so that
Yeah.
lasted
So
about a
crazy.
year, and restaurants spent like X amount of, they're already struggling, and then they have to like alter
Hmm.
their design of their entire restaurant. And then, they overturned that. So those all came down. It's ridiculousness. But the Olympics had a huge effect because, Governor Huntsman, yeah, yeah, he convinced most Utahns that we would look ridiculous if we didn't change some things for the Olympics. So it kind of relaxed a lot more right around that point, and it's remained pretty chill. There's a lot of states with just as restrictive liquor laws, but we did get a bad rap for a lot of that. Um, and surprisingly, when it comes to like after hours, in the '90s they were prevalent. And then there was a point where one got in particular hot water, and it was called Play School, and they were being taken to court, or they tried to fight it, and they said, well, we're gonna call ourselves a religion, and they got a lawyer, and they're like, well, this is our religious ceremony, is dancing and staying up all night,
Mm,
and, and well, the church had way more money and lawyers than they did, so they took it to the legislature and created a law called the No Dancing After Two law, which, as far as I knew, was on the books forever. And then, the past 5, 7 years, like after hours have just been kind of going under the radar as private parties where, BYOB, and
mm.
everyone's respectful. I've never seen anything go down that would be, dangerous. And, I hope it stays that way. It's really magical, actually, after dark in Salt Lake.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of going back to your point of like the counterculture, it's just like there are a lot of people who have a lot of energy to do things that are kind of out of line, I guess out of step with the religious, I guess, environment that they've been a part of. So that's really interesting. So let's see. So you've been in Salt Lake City for what? I guess when did you first, I guess, become involved in the Salt Lake City scene?
Well, I was in Idaho Falls,
Mm-hmm.
being a rebellious teenager misfit. When I was in a high school band. I'm just starting here because it's kind of leads into how I got to Salt Lake. But um, it's funny to think how long I'd been doing events because I was always in the performing arts. I grew up playing piano and singing in choirs and doing ballet and jazz dance and all kinds of musical stuff thanks to my parents. And my band decided that we wanted to bring some bands to Idaho Falls, and we threw a big kind of festival called the Idaho Falls Alternative Music Festival. And I was 16, and it was like a massive success for what we thought was, we had no idea what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I got my first taste of like promoting parties. Then I went away to pick pineapples in Hawaii for 6 months with a troubled teen program that the church was involved in and has now been shut down for a myriad of reasons, but it's basically child labor. And my older brother was the true hellion, and I ended up, just going as the second or third son that they sent away every summer to get some work experience. But, I freaking loved it because I was in a tropical island versus like the middle of Podunk, Idaho.
Yeah.
Came back and, my whole world had changed. I turned 16 and it was 1991 and rave was just taking off, and I ran into this whole party scene that was popping up through Jared Gold, who was a rave clothing designer and all around creative genius. Big fan of Andy Warhol and Studio 54, and like was just bringing all these ideas and funneling them into Idaho of all places. Like, and this was happening, a lot of places across the country. But it just was mind blowing to me. I went to my first rave at like a college dance club called the Galleria in Rexburg, Idaho, which is like a 35-minute drive out of town with some friends in a car. And then I was like, what just happened? I saw DJs for the first time. And I was already into dance music and collecting extended remixes from Depeche Mode and Erasure and Janet Jackson and anything I could get my hands on, and kind of getting into some of that dance stuff that was available at Sam Goodies and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I just I was like, this is my life now. Like, so I ended up hanging out with Jared Gold a lot, and incidentally, I played a party for him on New Year's Eve 30 years ago. This New Year's Eve will be the anniversary of my first time DJing.
Wow. Congratulations for that milestone. That's amazing.
Yeah, I have a feeling there's a lot of DJs that are getting a lot of milestones in the next few years here, since it all kind of popped up around the early 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he ended up, moving to Salt Lake City and getting involved in the club scene, and he wanted to make clothes and sell them to a wider market. And so I kind of picked up the torch and threw parties in Idaho for a little while, and kind of realized that it was a zero-sum game for me as well. And so I ended up moving with my girlfriend to Salt Lake and, worked with him in nightclubs. And, one of my jobs was just basically to screw in light bulbs and paint every room a different color every week and put up decorations. And, it was, I got to see all kinds of crazy stuff. And
Oh, sure. Yeah.
yeah, I kind of transitioned from renegade parties in the middle of nowhere to huge super clubs in downtown Salt Lake that were, it's 4 or 5 room,
Mm.
everything, a different music style every week, and getting promos from the DJs there and making connections. And that's where I met, some of the mentors that helped me out as a young DJ.
So was that, I guess, around, so a lot of people may not know that Cascade was, he spent a lot of time or spent some time in Salt Lake City. I think he went to the University of Utah, I believe. And then was it around that time that you were, I guess, figuring out your place in the scene at the time?
Uh, that is actually so. I went back to Idaho for almost a year, tried to do some stuff again there, and then I moved back to Salt Lake. And that's kind of when I met Ryan through a party that he was throwing at the Manhattan Club. He did a Monday night disco party that was hugely popular. It was
Mm.
kind of not quite a beer bust, but it was, I mean, this club was amazing. Nothing had changed in the Manhattan Club since the 40s
Mm.
or 50s, and it was like a classic jazz, smoky downstairs, all red carpet, spackled ceiling, vinyl red booths. And if you can imagine, like the college crowd, an early version of like hipster dumb,
Mm.
like they had seen the glory of how amazing and divey it was, and kind of became the place to be on
Mm.
Mondays. And Ryan would play vinyl every week, and got to know him a little bit. And he told me how he was repping for Records in San Francisco, and producing his own music. And he gave me a bunch
Mm.
of vinyl, like from the back room one day, and so I ended up playing a party for him, and then asked him if I could do any night of the week at the Manhattan if there was anything available, and he gave me the opportunity to do a Tuesday night
Mm.
party, which I did with a friend of mine that I met at a record store named Sergio Hernandez from Chicago, who was living and working in Salt Lake for a couple of years, and one of my dear mentors who taught me all about the Chicago house history and scene.
Nice.
And we called that party New City Movement, which was sort of the inspiration for what I've been doing ever since, which was like, how do we funnel just even the remote idea of house music and house culture and things that are not happening in Salt Lake into Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I didn't realize the New City movement had been around that long. Can you say more about, I guess, what New City movement is now, and I guess how it evolved from that early party series to what it is now, to this thriving movement or community?
That's being generous, but yeah, I think we have left our mark for sure. There's a long legacy of, basically just, a promotion non-cure, right? Like just a name for a crew that is ebbed and flowed. And, me and collaborator DJs, Nick James, I did a long party with, um, Sergio, and now, Gizmo and Matthew Fitt have been some people that I've worked with, and several amazing female DJs in the city. It's always just been about like fostering new talent and kind of keeping something on the regular, happening in the city
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty aimed at, good quality house and techno, and
Mm.
dabble in some disco here and there. And we work pretty closely with some other crews, Social Disco Club's one of them, and they do amazing stuff, and we have a lot of crossover there as well. So
Cool. So has New City movement been, I, I guess, hosting events for, I guess, continuously for this 20 plus year period, or was there any like period of breaks or anything like that?
There have not been any breaks until this year.
Mm,
Actually, we haven't stopped at all. I just moved to another country and kind of handed the keys to Matthew and said, "You go ahead and keep things going if you want for a while." But
yeah.
it's funny. I was getting tired like of promoting parties when I met Matthew like some 7, 8 years ago, and
Hmm.
he kind of gave me a new lease on life and was like, "I'll help you. I'll be there." And he really has. He's like
Mm,
made tapped a whole new vein of DJs and techno and coming from the Detroit area, Kalamazoo. Like he's uh, he's he's really blossomed himself as a DJ. Now he's producing. He's just put out 3 EPs and
nice.
yeah, one of the most amazing, talented, genuine, uh, lovely people, and also just a huge mentor in the community as well. He's taken on a lot of young DJs, and
Mm,
I do
very
that in a
cool.
different way. But he literally will invite DJs over to his house and let them use all of his equipment and borrow it. And whereas I'm kind of OCD about my shit, and
Yeah.
because I've seen too much of it disappear over the years or get
Yeah.
hammered, but God bless him, like he's amazing.
Very cool. So I guess, what do you think have been some of the factors that have helped New City Movement succeed? I guess and then I guess, so there, I guess I have a couple of questions. What factors have helped New City communities succeed? And then I guess, how do you go about promoting events? So I guess those are two kind of separate questions.
Um, I think the success, if you can say that we've been successful in anything, it's just like perseverance, like
Mm,
literally just not stopping and constantly being involved and supporting other people too, like always trying to go out to other parties and see what's popping and not be afraid of new styles of music and younger people and clubs and after hours and day parties and like we've touched and been a part of a lot of different scenes in the city and even been involved with the city itself on a number of levels. So, gay pride's always been a huge thing for us.
mm,
New Year's Eve, we do a huge annual event called the Bunny Hop, which is a huge Easter Sunday fundraiser, 13
mm,
years. So that's one of the biggest parties in the city every year. Like, we had a mile-long line last year to get in, and people could not get in for most of the day. Like, and we're still wearing smiles when they finally arrived in the doors. Like it's 5 or 6 p.m. and we opened at 11. I
mm.
was like, how did this become what it is now?
Wow.
But it's really, I think the real magic that we have tried to do is just bring people together. And I think that's just the core of what house music is all about, right?
Mm, for sure. Hmm.
And so, people meet each other and they get to have a chat and they break down, whatever boundaries they might have over the course of, 2 to 4 hours of dancing
Hmm.
and just let it all hang out. And then out of that comes real deeper connections that can
Right.
last a long time.
Yeah. That's, yeah, I love that. Cool. And then I guess how have you stayed connected to the community, the community of New City Movement? Is there like an email list? Do you rely 100% on social media and word of mouth?
Oh man, I mean, it's like any party promoter. We have an email list. We did a guest mix series. I think we have up to 13 or 14 mixes. I've done guest mixes for people across the country. Been in chat rooms going back to like the early days of deep house pages. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, it's just like social media, which is the bane of my existence anymore. It's like I'm on a big social media break at the moment. I'm just like
Hmm.
loving not posting anything.
Congratulations. That's
It's
awesome.
just, yeah, I mean, it's like a dragging an anchor around all the time to feel like you have to be present and telling people everything you're doing. And I was one of the first early adopters, like I have nothing against it. And I think it's amazing and can be used very powerfully, but it's a lot of work, you know?
Hmm.
So, but it does keep you connected to your audience, right? And that's what they want is they need the content.
Right. Yeah. So you do design work. I guess, has there been any like crossover between, I guess, like the skills that you've learned through design and branding and whatnot to promoting? I mean, I guess is branding important at all? Um, I think that as an underground scene, we kind of shy away from trying to focus on brand really at all too much. But I don't know. I don't know. We have a brand, whether we are intentional about it or not. I guess what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on branding and design and how that translates, or if there is any crossover to developing a an enduring party series?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and you hit the nail on the head. Like whether you're doing it or intentionally or not, like you're still projecting something,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's like no phones allowed at our party, and you have to call the hotline and there's no flyer kind of thing. Like that's still your vibe, and people are talking about it. So whether it's word of mouth or it's a logo or it's like using the same font on every flyer, which I know some people do. Um, yeah, I mean, for me, that's actually definitely one of the ways that I got into music was through cover art and photography, and just being fascinated with the entire package that came around like an album that you would buy, and
Mm.
from the music videos to this and that, and then you get into record labels like Defected, like and seeing like the whole community that they would build around the world, you know
Mm-hmm.
with consistent packaging and like the artists that they booked and the remixers. So I think that's kind of part of the world that I came out of, was trying to ape a lot of that. And because I had no real on the ground reference, it was this visual component that really was the easiest thing for me to like try and replicate, like
Mm.
fake. Um, and eventually, we became a real boy at some point.
Mm.
And that's really how we all kind of do it, right? We're all just trying to like, you know, figure it out. And there really are no rules at the end of the day. And that's kind of what's so cool about it. Like, you know, just trying to get to the source of the beat.
Sure. Cool. I love that. All right. So I guess I'm kind of changing gears now. My thoughts are kind of random sometimes, but so
Sorry, I might be rambling too.
no, it's good. I love this conversation. So as you've promoted events, um, I guess what advice would you have for DJs who are trying to get booked? What are what are some right ways to go about trying to get booked, and what are some wrong ways of trying to get booked?
Uh, I, I'm not the judge and juror of how that happens in any given scenario, but I mean, as far as we're concerned, and my experience is, I always find it helpful when people try to get involved in the scene that they want to get booked in, right? And
Mm-hmm.
kind of show up and be supportive, and I think dancing is important. Like, are you there really to just stand on the sidelines and you know, uh, what is it called? Train spot, train spot records, and I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that. Definitely be like a music uh, obsessive and be into that. That's your thing. But I think that going there for the music and the getting lost in the vibe and the dance and the people and making friends, I think that's a huge part of it for me.
Mm.
Because that's how people get to know you as a person. And I think what you're bringing behind the DJ booth is a reflection of how you are in your everyday life. And so, if
Mm.
you're willing to let people in and then reflect that back out through your music, like that's a powerful thing for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like authenticity is pretty, I guess, pretty important.
Yeah, I
Okay,
mean, when
cool.
you say the wrong way, I mean, don't come in and just be like the expected big ego, no experience person. That's cute and everything, but
Hmm.
like I don't think it really wins you any points to be demanding and
Sure.
not really give anything in return.
Yeah.
Show up and lift some speakers and like volunteer and like do all that stuff. Like start at the ground level and
There you go. Great value. And be, like you said, just be a part of the scene and the community. Yeah. Cool.
you can get other jobs that way too.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I guess so we talked about Salt Lake City and New City movement. I guess what have been some things that you've seen that have changed over, I guess what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen over the years in house music, just the scene in general. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man, that's a big one, but I think it's also cyclical, which I think is so fascinating. Like there's so many threads that are interwoven, like throughout the history of dance music. Like we remember when disco came back for the first time in the '90s as like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, this is cool again. Like let's dress like with bell bottoms and then go to raves and listen to Delight, who was tapping into that kind of vibe, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so disco never goes away. It's always like permeating everything in some way or another, whether it's like through the quality of the music or the production style or the sound system quality or just the I don't know. So like take that and transfer it to the rave scene, which is coming back in so many different strains now too, like with happy hardcore and like break beats and you know even cheesy Euro dance songs that are making their way onto dance floors for no apparent reason.
Mm-hmm.
People are like, wait, what? Just to like turn heads and everything. I just think it's super fun. Like, I mean, that's what dance music's all about is like keeping you entertained and surprised and happy. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's all about creativity. The sky's the limit. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot more democracy in what's happening, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is awesome. The dancers, not just the promoters, are getting involved in how their parties are shaped and promoted, and who's, how people get invited or let in or who they're reaching out to. I think it's just like it's becoming way more inclusive in like a totally different way, and it's very cool.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I can see that over the years. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I kind of took a long break for a while after being in the scene for a while, and then I came back, and it's just I think that at the time that I was kind of like I guess reinserting myself into the scene, a lot of people also were kind of doing that at the same time. It was just we kind of started our lives, and we're kind of at a point and kind of took that break for like home and family and career and all that stuff, and then we kind of got to a place in our lives where we could kind of do something again. So but then
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it just seems like there was like kind of this like big wave, I don't know, 2015, 2016, 2017, of people getting reinterested in, I'll say in air quotes, proper house again. And it's just it's always been there. It's never died or anything like that.
Yeah.
But when you talk about the cycles, I think that, I don't know, that there was that like that big wave that came, and we're kind of like seeing at the tail end of that a little bit as another generation kind of comes of age, and they're more interested in like what was happening in the early 2000s and whatnot. So yeah, it's just interesting to think about.
Yeah,
But
like the Spice Girls are suddenly cool again. Um,
yeah.
but I love that period that's been happening, like that you're talking about, where we are suddenly hearing these references back to like classic, you know, garage house, yeah, but like a little tweaked or maybe a little more techy or something. Or um, that's pretty cool, that people would want to get back into that. So
Everything new, everything old is new again, for sure.
I'm always a big proponent of who's using real instruments.
Mm,
I think you can do a lot with synthetic sounds, but like there's only so many fake flutes that I can hear, or
mm,
like vibraphones or whatever. Like when you hear the real thing, there's just a quality to that is immutable and so lasting. So like a master's at word production, with like Nuyorican Soul will just live on forever because
mm,
it is such a masterwork, right? Compared to like the track of the week that comes
right.
out, with the same vibe as last week.
Yeah, it's true. Well, because and it takes a little bit more of a commitment, because it's easy enough to. I mean, I shouldn't say easy, because there's some skill involved for sure for production, no matter what. But then trying to coordinate schedules and let go of some control sometimes, and just let the session player do their thing. It can be hard to let go of that control, and then just let things go and kind of relax into what's happening or what can happen, and open yourself to the possibilities as a producer. So yeah,
Mhm.
I definitely need to, I think, experiment with that a little bit more. I've done a little bit of that, but yeah, I've learned so much, and I feel like I've grown when I've done tracks that have had like those live instruments that you're talking about. So yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely need to do more of that. So yeah.
I wasn't specifically talking about you,
Oh
but
no, I know, and I did not mean to make it about me. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to edit that out or something.
no, no,
Because
no. But no,
it's
that's
gonna
real.
make me sound really self-centered. Oh my goodness, yeah,
No, but like,
yeah,
I mean, that's how so many producers start out, and like that
yeah,
is their world, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can really push
mm,
the limits and you can totally see the creativity and that people can like really, really go to, even with just the smallest amount of tools,
hmm,
and that's amazing. But those people should be reaching even further, like you're saying, like because you
mm.
have that talent, so why not like push it to the limit, and
Yeah.
maybe the sky's
It's
the limit,
interesting. I
right?
was talking with Sensei. He's the other day. He's going to be on the podcast as well in a future episode. Maybe it'll be past by the time we actually release this one. But yeah, so Sensei was talking about how he does live keyboards for his DJ sets, or to support other DJs doing their DJ sets, and it adds a whole
Oh,
new
cool.
dimension that I mean, I can only imagine the dimensionality that is created by that kind of, and because I've never actually experienced that before. So I
Oh
think it'd be
yeah.
lovely to see that and experience that in person. So yeah.
I've seen lots of DJ sets with drummers and like
Mm,
bongo players, and then actual like full kit drummers. We had one that would play with us at Just Want to Dance at the amazing W Lounge that went for 10 years in Salt Lake.
mm,
Um, I think his name was Pete Simpson. No,
mm,
I can't remember something. But and just yesterday or a couple of days ago, I was flipping through Instagram and saw Marcus Wyatt was
mm,
playing like the Daybreaker anniversary party on the pier in Santa Monica, like, and they had the most amazing session drummer and keyboardist like around him, and I was like, my mind was blown at how
mm,
amazing that people were receiving it, and like how well they were integrated into the tracks. Like, you really have to
mm,
check out this video. I'll send it to you, but
mm.
I told Marcus, like, you need to go on tour with these guys because this is a whole other level. Like, that's crazy.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, real instruments, whether in the studio or on the dance floor, can take it to make things really pop.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. Kind of changing gears again. There's so much that I want to cover. So you've talked about Salt Lake and you did spend so much time there, but you recently moved to Vancouver. How has that transition been? And I guess how do you, you know, we're in house music for life, basically, right? So how do you, I guess,
Yeah,
how do you
we're
insert
lifers.
yourself into the scene, to a new city?
Well, we kind of moved here for my husband's work. He's in the film industry, and there's a lot more of it here. And
Mm,
he's worked in Canada many, many times over the years. So it was kind of a natural thing that we've been talking about for a long time. It didn't make it any easier, like I have been pretty uh, planted in Salt Lake City for
mm,
so long. So it was a real life change for me, like selling everything I owned, literally my entire record collection, save 4 boxes of vinyl.
wow.
Um, but that was actually a beautiful thing because I sold it through a co-op that some friends of mine had opened,
Mm,
like literally right when I needed it most.
mm,
And they literally just took everything out of my music room, like the shelves that my husband built for me with all my records on. Like, they took the
mm,
shelving and you know all this other crap that I needed to get rid of. It was a godsend because all of those records have now gone back out into the community. Um, like, I've
mm.
almost sold the entire thing, and vinyl's worth more than it was when I bought it, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And so, like, I actually made some money off of it, which is, I was like, this is such a win-win. I was here thinking that I was going to have to like piecemeal it out on Discogs, which I've never
Mm,
been into. And I just couldn't see myself being that guy, like in my basement, like wrapping each piece of vinyl in paper and mailing it out. So that was amazing, and but it was hard. And this past 6 months we've been here has just been a huge reset, um, between just immigrating, which is a whole nother level of difficulty. I'm
mm,
now a permanent resident. My husband's a dual. I'm
mm,
very grateful for that. I know it takes a lot of people much longer and have many more hardships than I do. So I feel very privileged in that we've been allowed into the country. And but in between that, of course, I've gotten to know the neighborhood. I'm in a very gay neighborhood in downtown Vancouver in the West End. I've been
Davy
going out to
Street. Yeah.
parties. Davy is
Mm,
eclectic, to say the least.
yeah.
uh, and I've been here over the years, brought some DJs from Vancouver. J Tripwire's been super kind.
Hmm.
We've hung out at some parties, and I've known DJs have come through here already. That's just the advantage of being old, right? So,
Yes.
and that's the
Yeah.
great thing about house music. You can go anywhere. You can go to a record store. You can go to an after hours, a dance club, and kind of know. You can just spot who the players are. You can reach out to people on Instagram. Like you know, I feel like there's just an instant community that you always have access to. So that's been lovely. And I don't have any intention of DJing here really at the moment, but I have been mentoring some younger DJs that have like kind of come into my reality, and they're really lovely. So I'm more excited about what they're doing than what I'm doing.
Cool. So have you? I don't know. You mentioned earlier about kind of being tired of like promoting like all the time, like something all the time, and you finally got the help that the team that you needed for New City Movement. Do you ever have like the itch? Do you think that you might have like an itch to promote anything in Vancouver, or are those days behind you now? Are the promoting days behind you?
No, they're not. Yeah, it's funny. I've been working on a separate project that just has slightly different ambitions, called Neon Rodeo, which
Mm,
grew out of a project that I was brought into at the University of Utah, and was just an amazing experience. And it's like so grateful for that introduction to lots of young minds that like really dove into house music history, and created an amazing capstone project that, like, amazingly, we got the Frankie Knuckles Foundation involved in mentoring, these people, these young people, and
that's
the
awesome. I
party
think
went
I
off
read
without a
about that
hitch, and
in Five
so
magazine, Five magazine maybe, or what? But there was one publication that like talked about
yeah,
the
yeah,
University of
we
Utah
got some
Frankie
press.
Knuckles exhibit.
Yeah, we got some
Yeah,
press with Five, and um, yeah, we're the resident advisor pick for each year that we've been doing this event. The next year, that project was called Neon Desert, and then we decided to rebrand as Neon Rodeo because there was a festival called Neon Desert.
mm,
um, and so it's an ever evolving thing. It's not a it's not a solid thing yet that has my name on any dotted line. It's more of a labor of love, and
mm,
but we do have some exciting things kind of in the works. So I think it's gonna keep evolving and kind of be interesting, and maybe even tap into more art and interactive installation type
mm,
stuff, and maybe less of a urban dance music festival.
sure. So, can you say more about that Frankie Knuckles exhibit? Because not everyone had the opportunity to experience that. And what was that like? I mean, what were the components of that exhibit? And I guess walk us through I guess how it worked and what did it look like?
Well, yeah, I was brought in as an advisor, just as someone who'd been, on the scene in Salt Lake for as long as I had. So I contributed what I had to offer. And these students, I think there were maybe 11 of them or so, they really just dove into the history, and they wanted to honor um, the the scene and the originators in Chicago specifically that we were kind of diving into by celebrating Frankie. And so we reached out to them and had a couple Zoom calls, and they looked at what they had put together. Each student was given like a zone that
Mm,
they had full ownership of, to do something that they thought was an experience that tapped into the theater of experience, basically, which is this white paper that this whole project was based on, like how to really enrich an experience to the level where people really open up and remember it forever. Um, so it was just kind of amazing and mind blowing and inspiring, like what these kids came up with, or young people, young adults. One artist like did artwork, just completely all brand new artwork, with Neon Rodeo, or logos on everything, Neon Desert, completely original, like album covers that they did. And then there was a zine, and then there was a whole like timeline of the history of dance music. And we raised money for the Frankie Knuckles Foundation. It wasn't a lot, but I think we donated maybe $5,000.
That's awesome.
I could be wrong. I don't know, but it was a decent amount. And we had 3 different rooms. We had a chill out area. It was like, it just turned into a raging house party, which was the goal of the class, like to throw a house party, which I thought was the coolest thing I'd ever heard of. Like, I never went to college, but I would go if that was what I was allowed to do.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So I'll be sure to get that link from you. Like or is there any, I guess is there anywhere online that people can kind of like check it out? Like what happened for that exhibit?
neonrodeo.com. There's check out the photo galleries and the videos on the homepage, recaps from the past couple years. Last year we got a whole exhibit permission to reprint from Movement Music Festival in Detroit, about the heroes of Detroit techno. And that was like a huge win. Like, I can't tell you how much work that was to get to the right person to give me the go ahead on that. But so honored to be allowed to do that in a place that has no business, like celebrating Detroit or Chicago. We're predominantly white, but there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of passion, and a lot of people coming into the scene that have something to contribute. So it's really beautiful.
I love that. Awesome. All right, so let's see. Is there anything that you would like to let listeners know about, as far as like your philosophy on house music and parties and whatnot? We've covered a lot of it already, but is there any central message that you would I guess say is something that you believe in?
I would say just don't ever lose, always stay in like contact with your inner, child, or the dancer that that first experience you had with house music that really touched you, that made you have a transcendent experience. Like, don't forget that that's the reason you're doing it, and that you also are allowed to go back to that place for your own selfish reasons. And it's not just about creating, or doing something for your own aggrandizement, or or being popular, or being famous, or whatever. Like, that should always be your touchstone, right? To like go back to that, and whether it's just for yourself, but also to share it with other people.
I love that. Very cool. Thank you so much, and thanks for agreeing to do this podcast.
Of course. Yeah. Anytime.
All right. Take care. I hope you've enjoyed this content. I have a free gift for you. If you feel overwhelmed by all of the tasks that we have to complete as artists today, my release roadmap can help. You can download it at tonyfuel.com/roadmap. It's absolutely free. The tool helps clear up mental energy for creative activities because it gives you one place to manage all of your tasks related to music production, demo submissions, releases, and social media. Gain clarity and make more music today by downloading the release roadmap at tonyfuel.com/roadmap.